Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here today. I'm ROSMAN, as mentioned by Nazrul, the Acting Managing Director of Bank Rakyat, and I'll be the moderator for the session. Just a brief how we designed this event for your information. We wanted a mix of panel sessions where we tap best brains and ideas for the issues at hand via structured Q&A. Also a conversational session, as you saw earlier with our Prime Minister, and we'll have another one similar with our YB Minister later on, where we listen from people who change the course of our journeys, be that by way of policy making on how we live and work. And then we have this session, we call it the Bank Rakyat Talk. This session will focus on areas of specific expertise where the speakers will present work done on governance from the perspective of where governance did go wrong in their own purview of focus. With us today, we are privileged to have DATO Emeritus Professor Dr. SHAD SALEEM FARUQI, Professor of Law, Universiti Malaya, who will speak on where governance had gone wrong in the legal and regulatory aspects in Malaysia and what reforms are being done today. This will be followed by our distinguished second speaker, Dr. Anis Yusoff, Deputy Director General of National Centre for Governance, Integrity and Anti-Corruption, GIACC in short, who most of us know from his active work in GIACC and Integrity Malaysia. Dr. Anis will take us through the breakdown of governance at the national level and the policies that are being reformed and institutionalized to ensure Malaysia does not experience the level of catastrophic breakdown of governance as we have seen. Puan LATHEEFA KOYA, Chief Commissioner of the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, MACC, who literally changed her schedule to be with us today. Thank you, Puan. Let's give us a big hand. Will take us through the trajectory of the MACC and when and how it lost its independence as an oversight agency and what reforms are being done to ensure independence of oversight bodies in Malaysia. And Mr. PREMESH CHANDRAN, co-founder CEO of Malaysiakini, was so generous, sir, to have accepted to doing this on a short notice. PREMESH, we would really like to hear from a media organization like yourself who calls every one of us out, areas media itself needs to improve, and where governance in media has not been its best, and what media reforms are required in Malaysia. With that, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, and before we start our first speaker, let us watch this 1-minute video which encapsulates the session discussion.
We expect government to achieve results and use resources wisely and effectively.
Negara demokratik ini perlu ada perpisahan antara tiga kuasa, iaitu pembuat undang-undang, pelaksana undang-undang, dan kehakiman. Pentadbir menjadi tangan yang terkuat dalam melaksanakan segala urusan untuk membangunkan negara.
Government policies should benefit all and not just the majority or elites.
Menjadi tugas kita semua untuk memulih keadaan ini supaya kita kembali menjadi sebuah negara yang ditadbir dengan baik.
To administer a long-term perspective for cost effectiveness, improving infrastructure and upgrades, providing clarifications, rather than focusing on irrelevant matters. Public officials upholding promises, justifiable causes, and zero tolerance on spinning facts. These are just some points of good governance. But when governance gone wrong,
Now we have about 1 hour and 10 minutes from now, and each speaker will be given 15 minutes to deliver their messages. May I invite now Dato Emeritus Professor Dr. SHAD SALEEM FARUQI to start off the session. Please. Let's welcome him, please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yang berbahagia Dato ROSMAN Mohamed, para hadirin yang dihormati, Assalamualaikum. Thank you for the honor of this invitation. I'm supposed to speak on governance gone wrong, reforms required. The title is very provocative and perhaps deliberately so. Actually, the blessings of God in Malaysia are many, but of course, we cannot deny that serious regression has taken place in the last decade. Many at the top do not regard public office as a public trust, but as an opportunity for self-aggrandizement. Now, after G14, the government had appointed an institutional reform committee to propose some reforms, and I had the privilege of being a member of this committee. At the very outset, we were conscious of the fact that reforms are a journey and not a destination. That I collect my yes, thank you. I apologize for the interruption. At the very outset, the committee was conscious of the fact that reforms are a journey, not a destination. Everywhere in the world, the felt necessities of the times require adjustments of our laws, institutions, and procedures to make things better. At the same time, we were aware of an important limitation of our endeavor, and that is that law is just one and not even the most important factor and force that operates in society. Beyond legal institutions, there are economic, religious, cultural, educational, social forces, structures, and organizations that play a crucial role in our lives. These forces often operate independent of the law. Many of them are actually a state within a state. They are the deep state. They can defeat or delay the best of laws and create a wide gap between legal theory and social reality. At the same time, we were also conscious that the institutional reform or structural reform approach that is very popular in this country. Every few years, our top executives travel all over the world to see how structures can be reformed. They come and write loud reports, and well, then we wait for the next report in the next few years. So we have a habit of preparing these reports quite often, not following up. So this structural reform approach cannot by itself achieve integrity and efficiency in government. May I remind you that institutions are as good as the people who administer them. The need for able, honest, and visionary leaders and public officers with integrity is even more important than proper institutions and procedures. We have no shortage of managers in this country who know how to do things right. What we need is more leaders who know what the right things are. Now, the Institutional Reform Committee was tasked with proposals, and it was given only 3 months for its job. So what we did was we concentrated on about 10 institutions, which were basically the following: Parliament, the electoral process, independence and integrity of the judiciary, the Attorney General and the Judicial and Legal Service, the public services, the police, immigration, anti-corruption laws, communication, media and information laws, and human rights laws and institutions. I know I won't have the time to cover all of them. I'll just give you a brief overview. As you all know, Parliament has many constitutional functions, 4 of which are the making of laws, keeping the executive accountable and answerable to the representatives of the people, scrutinizing national finance, and providing a platform for redress of constituents' grievances. I'm sorry to report that except for the last function, The other functions are not being performed effectively. In the legislative sphere, for example, Parliament legitimates, it does not legislate. So what we recommended was that policy papers on legislative proposals must be issued for public feedback. At the moment, the whole legislative process suffers from the Sulit syndrome. Everything is secret. Legislative proposals, bills are secret. We should instead actually have white papers, green papers as in England, to brief the people on what the proposal is. There should be lifting of the veil of secrecy that surround bills. There should be more use of legislation committees after the second reading to invite public participation. In 62 years, legislation committees have been appointed less than 10 times. Actually, legislation committees, bill is introduced on the floor, the committee meets upstairs, outsiders can be invited. That should be the regular practice. There should be a creation of subsidiary legislation. For every one act of parliament, there are at least 15 to 20 pieces of perundangan kecil. Nobody knows what goes inside them. They are not debated in parliament. I think there should be a parliamentary committee to examine them. Parliament should set up, on the issue of ministerial responsibility, Parliament should set up departmental committees to oversee all ministries. Other key investigatory committees should be appointed on human rights, gender issues, environment, and public grievances. On public appointments, a parliamentary committee to oversee key public appointments must be appointed, and this has been partially implemented. On the budget, there should be a parliamentary budget office and a parliamentary committee to examine long-term budgetary proposals. The Public Accounts Committee must be headed by a member of the opposition. This has been achieved. Jurisdiction of the Public Accounts Committee and the Auditor General must be enhanced to cover non-financial institutions like Petronas. Under the relevant laws, the Yang di-Pertonagong can exempt some institutions from the scrutiny of the Auditor General. And I'm sorry to say, Petronas is exempted. There are many other institutions. That should not be so. The Official Secrets Act should not apply to parliamentary papers. An Institute of Parliamentary Affairs should be set up. For civil servants, we have Intan. For judiciary, we have ILCAP. What do we have for parliament? I think we should set up an Institute of Parliamentary Affairs to train our MPs. We should have an ombudsman, whatever you want to call him, ombudsman, motasib, to look into public grievances and to report to parliament. Electoral process is a very huge topic. Nobody has confidence in this process as far as its impartiality is concerned. Its democratic nature is seriously lacking. There's a great deal of what is called gerrymandering. Constituency lines are drawn to favor the government in power. Constituencies are very disproportionate in size. A comprehensive cleanup of the electoral roll is needed. The introduction of automatic voter registration and lowering of the voting age to 18 has already been accomplished. This is a remarkable achievement, and actually at the next election probably 5 more million voters will be participating. Political financing is something that is totally uncontrolled. As you all know, candidates have limits on what they can spend, but there is no limit on what parties can spend. There should be strengthening of local democracy by reintroduction of local government elections. Now, the judiciary, an independent, competent, and empowered judiciary is crucial to a constitutional democracy. Lack of it can also affect the economy, as investor confidence can be adversely affected by a judiciary perceived to be compromised either in independence or competence. There is a Judicial Appointments Commission for filtering Superior Court appointments, but its advice Actually, the word is misnomer, judicial appointments. It doesn't appoint. It merely recommends. The PM has the last say, and I think this should be changed. The Judicial Appointments Commission should be a constitutional body, and its recommendation should be binding on the Prime Minister. Law officers and legal service. There is a fused roles of Attorney General and the Public Prosecutor. The AG is the Chief Advisor of the government. At the same time, he is also the Public Prosecutor. Now, these two roles should not mix. I think the AG and the Public Prosecutor should be separated, and clearly the need for that was evidenced in the one MDB case, whereby the AG is also the Chief Advisor and Protector of the government of the day, and also supposed to determine whether the previous Prime Minister had committed any offences. There should also be an independent office of public prosecution. The Judicial and Legal Service Commission should be divided into three separate ways, three separate parts. Number one, the Judicial Service Commission to handle magistrates and session court judges. The Legal Service Commission to handle those who are in the Pejabat Pegawai Negara, and there should be a Public Prosecution Service Commission. Public services, it's a huge area. The government's pension burden needs to be reduced. In the years to come, the government won't have the money to pay all the pensions. Salary disparity is incredible. The minimum salary is 1150, I think, but at the top level, public servants, partly by their salary and partly by the allowances they receive for being member of the board here, member of the board there, it is something like 1 to 200 disparity actually, and that is too much. Members of the public service lack constitutional literacy. Members of the public service are subject to many service circulars, and I'm sorry to say this to you, many of these service circulars are in blissful disregard of the Supreme Constitution, blissful disregard of the laws that are applicable. I'm from a university, I know that actually our Akta says one thing, but the circular from the ministry says something else. And circulars are superior to the Akta and superior to the Constitution in actual practice, though of course not in law. There are many constitutional commissions, they lack independence. The political neutrality of the civil service is seriously in doubt. The check and balance role the civil service is supposed to play has not been very effective. The spate of mega economic scandals, mismanagement of environmental resources, poor town and country planning, the serious problem of illegal immigrants indicates that the role of the civil service as not only executors but also initiators and formulators of national policy for ministerial consideration has broken down. The financial tragedies relating to one MDB, Tabung Haji, EPF, Felda, Mara, Bank Negara, PFI, prove a serious breakdown of the check and balance role of civil servants. Bureaucratization of all government-linked entities. Malaysia allows its top civil servants to sit on the boards of virtually every government-linked entity, whether a university, other statutory body, or a commercial enterprise. This bureaucratization has stifled creativity. There is a serious problem of corruption, and I want to mention this. One area of concern to me is civil servants doing favors in return for lucrative positions in the sector after retirement. I think there should be a rule barring a civil servant from working for a prohibited period for an industry connected with his official work. Police, there should be implementation of the outstanding recommendations of the 2005 Royal Commission of Inquiry into the Police, including the establishment of the Independent Police Complaints and Misconduct Commission. The government must address issues in the Immigration Department like smuggling and human trafficking. It must establish the facts behind the Wong Kalian migrant death camps. Anti-corruption laws, the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission was established by an Act of Parliament. We actually recommend that the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission must be given a constitutional status, and its chief must have the same safeguards as that of a High Court judge. The MACC should have independent prosecution powers. At the moment, the MACC can do all the good investigation work, submit papers to the AG, and the AG's office may say, no case to answer. Because of Article 145, this requires a constitutional amendment. Communication, media and information, reforms to the Malaysian Communications and Multimedia Commission are vital. When we were on the Institutional Reform Committee, we heard direct evidence from media people that on the night of the election, they were given specific instructions from the minister to withhold information or to delay the release of electoral results. So MCMC has been used as a political tool to silence government critics. I'll just do the last point. Human rights, institutions and laws. Repeal or review of many laws is needed. One or two laws have already been repealed. The Anti-Fake News Act has been repealed to improve the human rights situation in the country. The arbitrary powers of the police over assemblies and processions, the Home Minister's power over publications, the Registrar of Societies' uncontrolled discretion over associations must cease. Prison and detention centers must be humanized. Orang Asli land rights must be protected. Domestic violence, trafficking in women and children must be prevented and punished. The plight of stateless persons, asylum seekers, refugees must be remedied. The spouses and offsprings of the above require humane consideration.
Dr. Professor,
Yes.
we are...
One more minute, sir.
Sure.
Freedom of religion must be strengthened. Environmental issues have human rights implications. I think we should strengthen the Human Rights Commission. Malaysia should accede to the core international human rights instruments. In some, there is much to be done. We all have a role to play. Let us keep the pressure on, and let us hope for the best. But I just want to say this by way of conclusion. We should not wait. By we, I mean you and I, pressure groups, NGOs. We should not wait for the AG, for Parliament to bring these reforms. It's not the laws that will improve the human rights situation. Actually, it is you and I that will improve the laws through our activism. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Sorry. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dato' Professor. I know this is something that probably, in the program at the university, you need more hours, to talk about this, and we cram it into 15 minutes. Thank you, Dato'. Now, can I invite our second speaker, Dr. Anis YUSOFF, to deliver his message.
I'm going to speak you from the other side. Thank you, ROSMAN. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera semua. This is not my real voice. I've been under the weather, but because this gathering is so important that I don't want to miss, or despite that I'm not well, but I thought I need to still come to be here. And of course, after listening to Prof. SHAD, now I'm having a bit of a problem. What else am I going to say? He has said it all. So let me start by sharing with all of you a bit of some of the things that we are doing. Of course, the title of this talk is about governance gone wrong, reforms required, and the perspective that I'm supposed to be sharing is about the national policy. What I'm going to do is that in 15 minutes, I'm going to have 3 parts of what I'm going to talk about, giving the context setting, stating the problems, and some solution that we have already done. So, about 5 years ago, when I was appointed the President and CEO of the Malaysian Institute of Integrity, I was trying to understand what went wrong. What has happened to this country after, more than 63 years now being independent. So in expounding it, I wrote this article 5 months after I was in office. If I can read you maybe the first few paragraphs. It reads, many have asked me, how can we eradicate corruption? I often reply that it is an impossible thing to do until we understand what motivates people and gets them to instinctively behave with integrity. Different people have different ideals and beliefs. We cannot force everyone to want the same thing, but that should not stop us from working to achieve the greater good. We need to see and understand the big picture, that the rich do not want the same thing as the poor. Those who depend on their jobs for their livelihoods do not want the same thing as those who live off investment and dividends. Those who depend on public transport, education, and protection do not seek the same thing as those who can afford private transport, education, and protection. If we were to assume that everyone wants the same thing, then we are mistaken and misled. Societies are complex and there are conflicting interests. So to assert otherwise, that is to deny the distinction of class, wealthy or influence, is akin to promoting one set of interests above another. So in this, the conclusion is basically, there is a moral erosion. Malaysia seems to have made a virtue out of pursuit of material self-interest. But ultimately, in the end, we must have a vision of the kind of society that we want. And ultimately, the efforts we invest through our education system must be guided by this vision. So I try to understand it further by writing, even to look at the root of corruption. Some people say we have better laws, but I argue better laws do not guarantee that the issue will be dealt with correctly. So we need to do more, and one of the things we have done is to help to promote integrity. When I was at the Malaysian Institute of Integrity, we developed a module for kindergarten because we have to start them young. We cannot expect to deal with a problem at a later stage. So all these are important. I wrote books, but until I read this particular book, this book was written by Kautilya, and this was written 2,400 years ago, and already 2,400 years ago, Kautilya was already talking about corruption. The point that I want to bring home is that corruption is not something new. It has been around for a long time. And if we were to look at this particular map, this is the map of Corruption Perception Index of Transparency International. They color the states according to the score, and those that score below 40, the color gets darker, and the smaller your score, the darker it gets. So, I mean, 2/3 of the world are in red. I'm sure that part of the world, if there are human beings there, that too will be red. So we are not dealing with something simple. So we have to really look forward. And coming to home, looking at where we are, Malaysia has been we have these 3 parts, the Peninsula, Sabah, and Sarawak. And these 3 parts come with different history. And if we assume that we can have one policy that can fit all and address, then we are not thinking clearly. Because in different parts of Malaysia, we need to understand the problems differently. When I look at the international indices, the Human Development Index placed us as 61 out of 189 countries in the world, with life expectancy 76, mean year of schooling 10.2, and gross national income per capita about $27,000. In terms of Global Peace Index, we are very good. We are top 16, top 20 countries. But the worrying bit is when we look at the Corruption Perception Index. We've been hovering. The highest we have scored was 53. The lowest was 43. So we are about that, 49 on average. And the score last year was 47. If we compare us with South Korea and with Indonesia, at one point we were at par with South Korea. But Korea went up and stayed above 50 while we are on this roller coaster ride. But we have to be careful because Indonesia, although about 15 years ago they are down there at 23, but they are continuously going up the score, and it's not possible for them to cross and overtake us. Now, coming to reality, a couple of years ago I did this survey in 4 public universities, and we asked the student, are the following statements an act of corruption? Although this is a perception study, but I want to share with you where the problems are. You know, we asked the student, accepting gifts in the form of money, goods, or services for services rendered. 36% of them said it's not wrong. 6% said they don't know. Using office funds for personal interest, 20% of them say it's not wrong. Directly involved in the process of appointing family members to fill vacancies at the office, 20% says it's not wrong, 17% say they don't know. And the best part is this, submitting claims for outstation accommodation when accommodation is already provided by the organizer. 37% of them say it's not wrong, and 22% of them says they don't know. You know, this part about taking and using office equipment, we asked further question. We said, why do you think it's not wrong? Some of them say that, well, I asked money from my parents, but my father said, it's okay, I'll get from the office. See, people don't know the line, what is right, what is wrong, what you can, what you cannot do. And assuming that this is, I mean, if I were to do this survey in this room, I'm sure the result will not be far off from that. That's perception. But let's look at reality. In reality, when we were planning the National Anti-Corruption Plan, we got the data from MACC, about 20,000 records of corruption cases. And when we look at the data, we found that 63% from that data are public officials. So of course, underscore that you need to know that if there's 63% who's on the take, there's 63% people from the other side who's giving. With the same data, we try to understand what are the area prone to corruption, and we found 42% of those are on public procurement. Of course, there are some issues on enforcement, and there are issues with administration. And public procurement, if you look at most OECD report, it's clearly stated that is the most vulnerable government activity. Public procurement has been identified as government activity most vulnerable to corruption. As a major interface between public and the private sectors, public procurement provides multiple opportunities for both public and private actors to divert public funds for private gain. We also look at the roots of corruption, and there are many, of course, you can see in this slide. But with that empirical evidence and understanding of the problem, we want to know, okay, what else have we done? We have done a lot as a country, as a nation. If you look at in terms of all the public policies, all the work from the time Tun Mahathir was Prime Minister, introduced the Dasar Persih Cakap Amanah, until today, you can see the kind of things that we have gone through, from JKK, MKPK, to JKP, to PIN, to JKTU. I mean, this is just a soup of acronyms that sometimes could be meaningless. But we want to make this time not just some nice saying, but we want to make sure that there is impact. So in formulating the National Anti-Corruption Plan, we really look at the data, and we really go and engage with many groups to understand the real problem, so that the solution that we give will be the one that will deal with the problem. I want to also share with you, I mean, this is what we have done so far. But do you know, way back in 1952, the British, during the Federation of Malaya period, have introduced a commission, set up a commission to inquire into matters affecting integrity of the public service. So the report came out in 1955. Among the members of this commission, there's one Honorable Encik Hussein On. And the findings, when I was reading this, is almost deja vu, because it's clearly stated the most vulnerable departments are those like the police and custom. It's still the same thing. So what Prof. Shad was saying earlier, that all these are things that we need to do, but we need to understand where are the root cause, where are the problems. So we know 1MDB is a problem, 63% of the problems among public sector, 1.8 trillion amount lost through illicit financial flow, and public procurement is one of the problems. Therefore, we need a drastic measure. So the whole NACP and the whole plan that we put together are because we understand where the problems are and we have to really nail it. So the priorities for reform started with, of course, when Yang Mohammed Perdana Menteri established GIACC as a central agency. We are like, if in the past EPU is economic planning, we are the governance planning unit of the Prime Minister's office. We suggested to the Prime Minister that all JKK, MKPK is a special cabinet committee on the management of integrity of the government to be converted because we are dealing with corruption. So we need to fight corruption. So therefore, we call it Jawatan Kuasa Khas Kabinet mengenai anti rasuah. One of the mandate given by that committee is to formulate the National Anti-Corruption Plan, and we thought that it has to be based, and the proposal of this National Anti-Corruption Plan must have strategies on education and continuing professional development. So, within what I have explained to you in a short time, we want to achieve 3 missions: uphold the rule of law, improve government efficiency, transparency, accountability based on good governance, and to create clean business environment. So that this is a culture change that's required, not just MACC or GICC or any other C that's supposed to be doing it, but every one of us. All of you in this room have a role to play, especially in the financial industry. The bank have started, and I think this is a good move. And the 6 priority areas, we started looking at public governance, political governance. It was dealing with political financing, and this whole problem of 1MDB started with that. So we will make sure there are some political financial act put in place. Public sector administration, because of the 63%. Public procurement, because of the 43%. Legal and judicial, we need to make sure that while we have the right policies, we need to make sure that the courts can also move swiftly and get the case to be completed. And of course, law enforcement. And finally, back to all of you here, the corporate governance part. And these 6 priority areas is so crucial for us to move as a nation in order to change the culture of society. And it has to start. I mean, if in the company, the boardroom, it has to start from the top. What else? Members of parliament or politicians are no longer appointed as chairperson or member of boards of directors. Can you click that GLC thing? See if it works.
Datuk, time's up tapi lagi apa? 2-3 minit?
Okay. Just this is important to show, otherwise people don't know the changes. In the past, you can look at all of this politicians with full office. Now, with the exception of Khazanah, the rest are all professional. Can we click? I will just go quickly since I don't have much time, but asset declaration. Now even the Prime Minister has to declare. Not just declare to anybody, but they have to declare to MACC. Datuk Shamsun and team will then have it on the portal of MACC. And people, the general public can go and look at the asset declared by the politicians. Give policy, the clear definition of what they can receive and what they can't. Immediate ban of support letters. Ministers no longer can do all this wahyu from the top. Misconduct of public officials. In the past, the ministers said they are not public officials. Now, effort will be made to redefine so that they also must be accountable. Independent of Audit Malaysia, the Auditor General Office will be more independent. All of these are part of effort like what being recommended by the IRC, that they will be reporting to the Parliament. Improve transparency in budget integrity and budget process. Effort to tackle money laundering activities. NFCC, this National Financial Crime Center, was set up. The picture at the back here, this group of people requires to have an independent police commission to help them actually, not to just go and find the misconduct. And that particular act has already gone to Parliament after first reading. It's gone through the Select Committee, and hopefully it will be approved in the next Parliament session. Separation of responsibilities of the Attorney General and the Public Prosecutor. Separation of judicial and legal services. Political donation. See, I'm answering Prof. Shad's question. This has gone through, is going to the to the Select Committee, and hopefully by next session of Parliament, this will be debated. Establishment of Ombudsman. You asked for it, we have it. So this is being done now, and we hope also by next Parliament session, this will be moving. Of course, the Election Commission is working now to clean up the voters list. Very briefly, Datuk, if I may, to just finish to show a few things that we have done. Enhancing good governance at public service. The appointment of KSUs are no longer at the mercy of the ministers. They can set up the criteria, the kind of people that they want. The KSN and the KPPA will then assign the right person for the job. In terms of ambassadors abroad, no longer political appointees. And that has been made clear. Reform of Parliament. Again, one of the recommendations of IRC, some of the things that are already being done. To reintroduce the Parliamentary Service Act, the Dewan Rakyat has established 6, in fact 4 more is going to be done. It will be 10 select committees so that where they have the engagement and to get feedback from the public. And of course, the chairman of the Public Account Committee will be reserved for an opposition member. Implementation of corporate liability, which I think LATHEEFA will explain further. By 1st June, this act will be in place. And appointment mechanism, now starting after this, the appointment for MACC Chief, Chairman of Election Commission, Suhakam, and Suruhanjaya Pelantikan Kehakiman, Prof. Shad. All that will go to Parliament. We've also introduced the ISO 37001, and there is a Malaysia birthday song. I don't know whether you have heard it, but otherwise maybe we can play it later. So, with that, those are some of 115 other initiatives that have been put in place. But when we track in terms of some of the impact that we have made, corporate governance watch, we have moved from 7 to 4 out of 12 Asia-Pacific economies. In terms of ease of doing business, from place 24, we have moved up to 15. In terms of advancement trust barometer, from the score 46, we got 60 in last year. And in terms of democracy index, from 59, we've moved to 52. And press freedom, of course, we've done very well. We are now #1 in Southeast Asia, and globally, we are number 1, 2, 3. Why NACP? We need to break the corruption chain. We're serious about this, and that's why I'm here to come and talk to all of you, because we need all of your help. Because somebody said, but somebody asked me, why we need to have another one? Didn't we have PIN and all this? But I quoted Mr. Fuller, who said that you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. I conclude, after the launching of the National Anti-Corruption Plan, I wrote this piece, that we need to build a place called trust, a place where people will only take what's theirs, not to take other people's things. We need to be able to have a place where the shop does not have to have the shopkeeper. People can come and put money and take what they need. That's the kind of culture change, but that's not going to happen tomorrow. That's why all of you have a role to play, because you have to start by yourself. That integrity must be with you. This is not just rhetoric. Reforms are being undertaken, as I've explained, some example I've given, and we're serious about this. But ultimately, the problem is here. You see, when the baby is still in the mother's womb, we hear the heartbeat. God put the heart first before the brain. But problem with all of us, when the baby is out, we want our children to be intelligent. We want our children to, go to tuition and schools and whatnot. So by the time they get to universities, the brain is very big, but they become heartless people.
Thank you, Dato'. No, it's a very interesting topic. I'm sure you have more time. It's great for us to hear more from Dr. Anis. May I now invite Puan LATHEEFA KOYA? I've negotiated time a little bit with
I thought she has given me her 5 minutes.
Please, Puan. Thank you.
Thank you, Datuk ROSMAN. Distinguished speakers and guests, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And a very good afternoon. I hope you all are still awake because I believe it's a heavy lunch. I've been told to speak, and I was actually told it was supposed to be some kind of a TED Talk method, but I'm sorry, but I really don't know how to do this, and I'm still figuring out how to use this. Is this up? Oh, okay. Just keep going. Okay, all right. I'll just start with a background on how MACC has become what it is, how it evolved. Initially, in 1959, after Merdeka, in its efforts to combat corruption, a small unit was under the purview of the Prime Minister's Department, which carried out corruption prevention activities. Concurrently, the Criminal Investigation Department, Special Crime, under the Royal Malaysian Police was in charge of the investigation of corruption cases. Meanwhile, prosecution of corruption cases were handled by the Prosecution Division of the Ministry of Justice. At that time, 3 separate agencies were handling corruption issues. Therefore, the government decided to consolidate their task under one umbrella, and the ACA, Anti-Corruption Agency, was formed in 1st October 1967. The YDPA, Yang di-Pertuan Agong, had passed the National Bureau of Investigation Act on 29th of August 1973, and the ACA changed its name to National Bureau of Investigation, NBI. With the Act, it granted a greater power to NBI to probe cases involving national interest despite being corruption cases. The Anti-Corruption Act 1982 was passed by the Parliament on 13 May 1982, and NBI was then renamed to ACA. In 2008, the former Prime Minister, Tun Abdullah Badawi, announced a move to reform and enhance the powers of the ACA. This was due to the fact that, based on a public feedback that was done in 2008, the then government realized 3 main sources of the public's frustration on issues of corruption. People felt that the institutional and legal framework for anti-corruption remains structurally weak, therefore prone to abuses. There was a need for clear separation of powers between the institutions of government, as well as a high degree of transparency and public accountability from enforcement agencies. The perception was that anti-corruption enforcement was slow and inconsistent. Some said that so-called big fish were protected, while the small fry faced the full brunt of the law. Whistleblowers were also said to be inadequately protected. People felt that the existing public procurement system and procedures for awarding government contracts were rife with opportunities for corruption. He then announced 4 key reform initiatives that address the issue of anti-corruption, which is to restructure the Anti-Corruption Agency, ACA, to become a full-fledged Malaysian Commission of Anti-Corruption. The capacity of the Commission to be enhanced, and for the next 5 years, from 2008 to 2013, the size of the Commission was to be tripled, adding a further 5,000 officers to the current total of just around 2,000. The introduction of legislation to provide a comprehensive protection for whistleblowers and witnesses. Improve the public procurement process through measures and target and address specific problem areas in the system. In 2008, the Parliament approved the formation of an independent anti-corruption commission to be known as Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, and replacing the ACA Act 1982 to the MACC Act 2009. With this act, MACC became an independent, transparent and professional body to effectively and efficiently manage the nation's anti-corruption efforts. In the MACC Act, provisions was also made for 3 independent panels who are also to closely and constantly monitor the functions of the MACC, basically to work to function as an oversight body. In 2010, the Whistleblower Protection Act was also passed. Evolution to reform and progress was moving towards the right direction, but the whole thing took a turn in 2015 when the major 1MDB scandal broke out and tested the independence of every institution, including the MACC, Bank Negara Malaysia, PDRM, Judiciary, and the AGC. Every institution was compromised in so many ways and led to public frustration and anger and brought the downfall of the old regime. With the new government, the opportunities were huge to start off with a clean slate. So MACC is a key agency in ensuring and overseeing reforms that will take place to prevent and stop corruption. This can be seen by the NACP, which I think has been extensively discussed by Dr. Anis, in which MACC plays a significant role to oversee the implementation of 115 initiatives, and amongst the key highlights would be with regards to drafting of new set of laws, strengthening processes and procedures. It is expected for all government agencies, departments, ministries, state government, every level of administration units of the whole country to have proactive plans of the OACP, Organizational Anti-Corruption Plan, in place. Anti-corruption plan will ensure the tightening of leakages, centralization of power, transparency, and governance. On the part of MACC, we have our own strategies to increase and step up prevention and deterrence, especially in the areas of government agencies and government-linked companies. Two key things to note that we have done so far is to enhance the monitoring and placement of integrity officers and the integrity and governance unit. At this stage, I would just like to insert also the fact that we wish to commend Bank Rakyat to being one of the first bank to actually agree to the placement of the integrity officer. The role of the Inspection and Consultation Unit, a division of MACC, which is able to go into agencies to inspect and suggest or order for changes of procedure and system which are found to be the cause of corruption. New laws that have been introduced and in the midst of being enacted, including the introduction of corporate liability offences, specifically Section 17A, and drafting laws which makes it mandatory to declare beneficial ownership. Apart from that, we also have been assigned, or rather authorized, to manage the declaration of assets of the MPs. On the part of MACC, we've gone a step further by going down to the various state governments and urging them to follow suit what the federal government has done so far with regards to the declaration of assets by its representatives. We've asked them to also place the integrity or expand the integrity and governance unit within the office of the chief ministers as well as the Menteri Besars. Reforms that we have made so far, which we are proud to tell, basically apart from the things that we've just mentioned, is also the end of the orange t-shirt to be worn by suspects in court, which has raised issues on the presumption of innocence. We've also installed CCTVs at our lockups, which functions, of course, audios and video recordings at our interview rooms. I'm not talking about your private phone calls. Lastly, I would also like to say again a special thanks to Bank Rakyat for its commitment and serious integrity drive in order to achieve the people's aspiration, and hope it will continue to do so. Shabas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Puan LATHEEFA. Now may I invite, last but not least, Mr. PREMESH, please.
Very good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, my fellow panelists and guests here today. I didn't prepare slides, I hope you forgive me, but I just thought we'll just have a conversation about the media and corruption. My name is PREMESH, I'm from Malaysiakini. How many of you all read Malaysiakini? Let's have a show of hands. Great, great. So I got to market Malaysiakini to a few more of you who don't read Malaysiakini yet. I think corruption is something very dear to my heart, and it's a lot about what we saw in the country that's why we started Malaysiakini. I started my journey in media about 20 years ago, over 25 years ago, with The Sun. And those days when you go for a press conference, a ministerial press conference, often what would happen is that, you'd have a lot of reporters, but they'll all ask very nice and polite questions to the minister. There's nice, kind of a rapport and discussion. And when I joined the media and I started asking some tough questions on our policies on human rights and corruption, very often before I reached my office back in The Sun, my editor would have got a phone call saying, what's your reporter trying to do? Why is he asking tough questions? And it was very hard to actually ask tough questions and actually put a report in the media. So it's been a long journey, and that's one reason why we started Malaysiakini. Tun Mahathir, in all his wisdom, agreed that the internet would not be censored, and that is why we use this sort of differences between the traditional media and online media to launch Malaysiakini 20 years ago. Fast forward to today. Today, if any of you go to a press conference, I don't know how many of you went for the press conference with Tun Mahathir this morning, but today the press conferences are really tough for the ministers and for officers. There's a barrage of very hard questions being asked. It's almost a siege, for people to answer these questions. Again, Tun Mahathir would have been asked about the transition. I'm sure LATHEEFA is being asked about the tapes, and it goes on and on. And that's really the role of the media in terms of accountability, is to actually ask the tough questions, whether we like it or not, and to get those questions out in the public, for the public's opinion. It's not always fair. There are a lot of speculation going on. And the freedom we enjoy today, there's a lot of freedom. The reporter's not getting arrested and not getting jailed. But the question is, how do you manage this media opening or reform? As Anis mentioned, Malaysia is now ranked #1 in Southeast Asia in terms of press freedom. But you still need to manage this communication between the media, the press, and the consumers of media, the public. And that is why the government has is forming the Media Council. However, it's been a year and a half and we still don't have the Media Council in place. Are you okay? I think Lat's got to run. No problem.
Has to leave for another engagement as she make changes to her schedule to be with us. Thank you. Thank you for LATHEEFA. Yeah, Ramesh, you may continue.
You see all the media, going out with all the cameras because they're going to ask her some tough questions as she goes out the door. And that's the role of the media. I think the question is now, how do we move forward with the forming of a media council, and why is there a delay in the forming of a media council? The role of the media council is for the media to self-regulate, so that there is an important that the standards of independent media can be upheld, so that we are independent and we can report independently. At the same time, if media makes mistakes, we can be held accountable through a process of a complaints process, where a process of ombudsman could actually look and see how fair these reports are. So I think there needs to be more independent media, at the same time, a counterbalance in the form of a regulatory approach in terms of a media council. But that said, the media alone cannot cut down on corruption. As much as we can report it, very often we do not have access to information that the government has. And for that, we have requested that the government introduces a Freedom of Information Act and do away with the Official Secrets Act. So actually, the tangible information available to the government can be reported on, so that the accurate picture can be portrayed to the public. So this is definitely another way to counteract corruption, is to have more information in the public sphere. In other areas, it is not just relying on the role of the media, but using technology, we can actually arm every citizen to start reporting on issues. whether it's potholes, whether it's rubbish, whether it's government contracts that are not being completed, federal allocations of fund. It's indeed time that we engage the public in reporting on these issues and highlighting these issues so that the powers that be actually know what's happening on the ground. So technology can be used to facilitate input as well as to monitor projects on an ongoing basis. And that's also a very way to encourage the public to participate in development and making things more accountable. But lastly, I wanted to say is that, how beyond all the plans, there's still a very strong culture or questioning about corruption. Even now when we deal with government departments, when we try to register for a permit or a license, within 10 minutes of submitting an application, we often get calls back from agents saying, hey, if you work with me, I will get your application approved within days. If you don't work with me, it'll take weeks to get approved. And this has happened consistently in various ministries that we have worked with. Malaysiakini now is working with different ministries on different issues. The other day I got stopped I was driving and I stopped on the emergency lane to just take a break to check on some hot news. And immediately a cop pulled up and they used a very harsh tone. Oh, apa buat di sini? And they always ask you, kerja di mana? And the minute I say kerja di Malaysiakini, oh, then they're very nice. Because they're like, oh, kerja Malaysiakini, and very polite. The tone really changes. So, it's very different. So you are always sending a very subtle message to the public that, one person is an authority and you can use that power to make life difficult for you. Or if you are a person of authority and a person of power, I will make life easy for you. My kids go to school in public schools. The toilets don't work, half the school's falling apart. And it shows our young people that corruption in building facilities in classrooms, in schools, even the classes are not being built properly, it is acceptable. So essentially what the media does is try to highlight these key issues and to show that this should not be acceptable. And by actually improving the status of services in the public, then I think over time we can develop a culture which does not tolerate corruption, and then we can improve. So I hope I shed a few lights on media. I'm sure there's a lot of questions. I'll be happy to take more questions about the media. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for quite a insightful and impactful presentation from my perspective. And before I open the floor to questions, because I think we'd like to invite members of the floor to ask questions. If you have burning questions, especially questions that if you don't ask, you will not be able to sleep tonight, please, please ask questions. But before that, maybe I'd just like to open to the panel, just one question from me. How would people like you and me, like us in the room, can really help in this reform, in really making Malaysia a better place for all of us? Would anyone like to respond?
So I personally think that we all have a role to play. If a lone individual is prepared to stand up and say, hey, this is wrong, I think that may inspire some others also to stand up and say that this should not be permissible. So I think we should not undermine the possibility that in the desert, a sand dune may grow around a single blade of grass. I think each one of us by himself is nothing. We are just a trickle, but I think trickles can become a torrent, if there are lots of trickles together. So I think that's what we need to do. We shouldn't worry about what others think about our views. I know there'll be others who will condemn us for not being true to our bangsa, agama, negara, just because we criticize the leaders or criticize corruption. I think we should take a strong stand but in a civil way. And the other thing that I want to recommend is we should challenge views. We should not challenge persons. In this country, the attitude is the moment you disagree with someone, start saying, oh, he or she is from such and such bangsa or such and such agama, undermine the person's character. I think we should question the views with a better view. I think we all have a role to play. That though I didn't get to say it well, but in the area of human rights, I've seen over the decades, in the 70s, consumerism was a dirty word. Human rights is still a dirty word. Being liberal is wrongly associated with a homosexuality and things like that. I think those of us who believe in moderation, in tolerance, in respect for human rights, in integrity, I think we should speak up. We do what we have to do, and we leave the rest to God.
Thank you, Dato' Professor. Give you a big hand, please. Ramesh, you like to add?
Yeah. I think if I have one wish for 2020 is that all of us perhaps be a little less cynical about change, that be a bit more positive. There are a lot of people creating change around us in their little bits. And I know a lot of people are doing their best, whether in government or in the private sector or young people. Everybody's working on change. But there's a lot of cynicism around that things won't change, it's too difficult to change, it'll take too long to change. But what if we have a different approach? Why don't we look around us and help someone who's trying to make change? Help, just do a little bit, saying, okay, here's what I can do for you in your journey to make change, to make the world a better place. So just kind of reduce our cynicism and be a bit positive and help others to be a catalyst for change. I always say that, kita Malaysia, we are our country. We can't expect the government to deliver the results unless we ourselves stand up and be part of this change. So if we say kita Malaysia, we are all part of Malaysia, then what is the country that we can build? And together we will get there. So I think in this year of 2020, let us all accept that this is our country and let us all build it together.
Thank you, Ramesh. Dato' Enes?
I think people want to see blood on the street. No, if I can answer your question, Rosman, I think one of the things that people can do, you have to start this at home. Start with yourself. Don't just talk about it, but be the person of change. Be the one that shows example what it means to live with integrity. The last slide that I shared just now about that baby and the student, I think if we can reverse that to balance so that we have to touch the heart. We can't just leave it, when the brain gets too big and they become besar kepala. And that's going to be a problem to the country. So we need to make sure that while we want people to be intelligent and smart, but we want to have people with a good heart. I think if each and we are parents, we are brothers, we are we are sisters, we have a role to play, and if we can help mold the future generation, and I say this, the future generation will change. And I believe this, small people in small places doing small things are the one that will change the world. So just do it, no matter like what Prof. Shad said, whatever people say, people can be skeptic, just do the right thing. The best thing is to do the right thing when nobody's watching you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dato' Anis, Ramesh, and Dato' Professor. Now, I have a good 5 minutes before we can end this session or close this session. I'd like to invite questions from the floor, please. The mic, I think, is available by the side. Please, yeah. Please state your name and where you're from, and then you can address to any one of the panel.
Testing. Thank you, panelists. My name is Sean Adam. I'm from the European Chamber of Commerce and Industry. My question is to Dato' Anis. Selamat petang, Dato' Anis. The EU business community is very happy with the new changes the new government has done to reduce corruption and increase transparency. This has boosted investors' confidence, and as you know, more investment comes into the country, more jobs for Malaysians, and more food on the table. My question is, what role can EU companies or even any foreign investors play to support the NACP framework? Thank you.
If you look at the slide that I shared earlier with the 6 primary areas, there's one on creating a clean business environment. That's on corporate governance. I think EU can certainly play an important role by number one, by bringing the members of EU and spread this message. You see, this morning I was with the Chief Secretary, and one of the things that he reminded us that we've done a lot of things, but people don't know what we have done. I'm sure before you attend this conference, not many of you know some of the things that I've shared. We don't know, and I was complaining to Prem. Every time we have a meeting, we try to share this information, but the press will only pick up the sexy things. You know, things where probably get the trending, but the real stuff are not being reported. So partly our fault, we don't know how to blow our trumpet. So we have this issue. So here, I think if there are partners like this, chambers of commerce, anybody who would like to collaborate and be our partner, help to spread the message. We need to get this message across so that people know the things that have been done. We're not just talking. Gone are the days of the stock shop, but we are on the roll. The action's already there. You are seeing some of the impact. So please, you can come and visit us. We'll be happy to share more information with you, more detailed information so that you can share with your members. But you need to engage with your members so that they know the things being done, and hopefully more of them will come to invest in Malaysia. So I'm open and hope to see you, Sean, in probably after this.
Thank you, Dr. Anis. Thank you for the question. Any more question from the floor? Yeah, please.
Used to technology these days. At my age, a retiree. My name is Suhaimi. Since there's nobody else wants to ask a question, so I'll take that challenge. I've got a 3-in-1 question. Number one is about sustainability of reforms. What I meant is that, you know, next general election, if a new government comes in, then things may just flip over and then it's back to square one. So I think at least we need, many of the reforms must be at least 2/3 majority. If that's not happening now, I think we seriously got to think about it. Number two, about mass media, print media, I think there must be consideration of our value system and the kind of level of knowledge and education that we have among Malaysians. So if you compare our country, citizens, with the developed world, then I think there's that gap of knowledge and education. Number three is about, sorry, I forgot at my age, I've got to open up okay, it's about, okay, this is about corruption. Protocols, feudal, as what Tone MS said in the morning, and patronage. How much of these three things has sort of encouraged corruption and also the lackadaisical attitude among Malaysians? Thank you.
I need to wrap up the session, but just
a quick
if I can
one.
Respond to that.
Okay, so I may ask a very pertinent question.
Sure.
For me, sustainability is the first question that I asked my committee when we were planning and we're designing the policy. I'm very particular about making sure that not a one-off. It has to be sustained. It has to make sure there's an impact that we made. So the key thing is that we want to make sure that whatever we do, that it must be written as laws, as arahan. So it's not just initiative by itself. It's not a project. So some of the things, there is laws to it. So if somebody else comes later and they want to change, they can, but they have to go through the process. And if the member of parliament support that, then we know the kind of member of parliament we have. So we have to put the right people in parliament. We have to make sure that all these laws that we are writing now will be implemented, that it will be there, even whoever comes later. And that is the spirit behind the effort that I've shared earlier.
Thank you very much. I think our time is up. And really, this has been a great discussion. How I wish we have more time. Thank you, Datuk Anis. Thank you, PREMESH. Thank you, Datuk Professor. And I'm sure thank you, Puan Lateefah KOYA is not here, but thank her too for a very interesting discussion this evening. Now, our minister is making his way, and then we are going to have our next session. And with that, I'll pass or hand over this session to the MC.
Thank you, Datuk.